I'm excited to have with me my friend and extremely impressive CEO and co-founder of Affectiva, Rana el Khalouby. Rana is the author of Girl Decoded, which is an incredible book. I highly recommend, and it'll be a lot of fun to have a little bit of chat about it. So welcome, Rana. Glad you could be here.
Thank you for having me, Debbie.
So Girl Decoded is a really, really interesting story. And it's a personal story too, right? It's a business story and a personal story about your own journey to where you are today. So tell me a little bit about the book and why you wrote it.
So the book it's a memoir. So it's a juxtaposition of my personal journey. I grew up around the Middle East. I was born in Cairo and then moved to Kuwait and Abu Dhabi. And then I had the opportunity to travel to Cambridge to do my Ph.D. and then joined MIT as a postdoc before starting Affectiva. All in the quest of building technology that has emotional intelligence. So there's that thread. And I also take the reader behind the scenes of how do you build artificial emotional intelligence, and what are the use cases, and what are the ethical and moral implications. So it's kind of this juxtaposition of these two stories, my story and the technology story. And I really wrote the book because I wanted to make the case for human-centric AI in a way that is accessible to a general and a broad audience. But also I realized, I guess, in writing the book that my own personal story can be an inspiration for others who are, starting their journey, building something they're passionate about. And so, yeah, hopefully the book, brings some ammo to people on their journeys.
Did you always think that you wanted to be a founder of a company?
Not at all. My dream, actually, and I was really fixated on that goal, was to become faculty. And so when I was at MIT as a postdoc, that was the plan, right? I was getting ready to apply for a faculty position, but we started to get so much commercial interest at MIT that I think for me, the tipping point was realizing I had an opportunity to bring something I'm really passionate about to the real world at scale. So that was the impetus for starting Affectiva.
I've heard you talk a little bit about this idea that you were actually a little nervous about stepping into the CEO role after, founding this company. Tell me a little bit about that. Why were you worried about it, and how did you get over that?
So when we first, so my co-founder is Professor Rosalind Picard. She runs the affective computing at the MIT Media Lab. And we were working together and then started the company together. But she never left MIT. So she was, tenured professor, and that was her full-time job. When we first started the company, we both decided that we needed to bring in kind of a seasoned business executive to run the company. So my title was the Chief Technology Officer, and we brought in this guy to be CEO. And after 4 years, he decided to move on. So the question became, who's going to be the next CEO? And a few people on our board said, well, Rana should be, because it's her technology, it's her baby, And I remember just like fretting over that and thinking, oh my God, I've never been CEO before. I'm going to fail, right? So I didn't step forward. I declined the opportunity. At the same time, our head of sales, who had also never been CEO, he was like, I'll take it.
Of course.
Right. So he became CEO. So between 2013 and 2015, he was the CEO, and I kept the CTO title. And right after my TED Talk in 2015, I went back to Boston, and I was like, wow, I actually Googled, what are the job and what are the responsibilities of a CEO? And I created a bulleted list, and I realized I was doing it. I was raising money for the company. I was the evangelist for the whole space. I ran the majority of the team, which is because we're an R&D company. So I was literally very involved in the hiring and the product development. So I went to him and I said, hey, I want to be co-CEO. And he was like, that's a really bad idea. The more we talked, the more I realized I wanted the role, and I was ready for it. So, after a lot of negotiation, he agreed, and we took that to the board, and it was a unanimous vote. And,
Nice.
And it made me realize I was my own biggest obstacle, right? And so, the takeaway from that story is you got to believe in yourself. I still do actually have this Debbie Downer voice in my head that's always.
I don't like that phrase, Rana.
Yeah. So I'm working on it.
It is tough. I think sometimes we have this voice in our own head that's more critical than what other people think of us. We're the toughest on ourselves, right? So tell me a little bit about how you're finding it now. You're CEO, you're knee deep in everything. Are you glad that you did that? Are you glad that you made the play for that? And how has that kind of played into how you run the company?
So it's been 4.5 years now since I stepped into the CEO role, and I love it. I think the thing I love the most is just seeing our team and our partners kind of embark on this journey and develop both professionally and also personally, right? So I take pride in that. It is definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It's definitely challenging, and I take it seriously, and so it just occupies a big part of my mind share in my brain, and I can't switch it off. It's like literally like having a kid. I just can't switch it off.
Right.
I think that the thing that we did over the past 4 years is reinvent the company, really. So we had fallen into one of our main markets is in the ad tech space, and so we had, in the years before that, we had kind of become a boring ad tech company. And when I stepped in, I reinvigorated this. We really kind of defined what is emotion AI. We created the Emotion AI Summit to be thought leaders in the space and develop an ecosystem around us. So I really think, and also prioritize the conversation around ethics, right? So we drove that. We also created the automotive business as a new kind of application of that technology. So yeah, it's exciting, but definitely also, as I'm sure you realize, quite stressful.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what is emotive AI, and where would I ever use that? Like, how is that going to become part of my life, and why should I care?
Yeah, our kind of end goal here is we envision a world where the default human-machine interface is basically one that has conversational abilities, perceptual abilities, and empathy. So in the future, all our devices will have this kind of emotion AI or emotion AI capabilities. But for now, some of the applications, for example, we do a lot of work in the automotive industry. And there, the use case is in-cabin sensing. So you've got these sensors in the car that can detect if a driver is falling asleep, if they're texting while driving, right? And I have a teenager like you do, and it worries me. These young drivers. So this AI would be able to detect distracted driving and drowsy driving.
Oh, that's really exciting. And so you're finding a lot of interest from the automakers to improve their safety using these kinds of sensors?
Yeah, exactly. We're working with a lot of the top automakers in the world to bring this to our cars, but also that and I find that really fascinating. We're also in a lot of conversations around the future of mobility and what will the future of transportation look like with autonomous vehicles and robotaxis. And the idea there is the same solution would be able to track how many cars are, the same solution will be able to track how many people are in the vehicle and what's their mood, what activities are they engaged in, and then it can personalize that riding experience. It can change the lighting, the temperature, the music, the content. So that's fun too, kind of ideating what this all will look like.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So you can really do a lot of futuristic stuff and personalize experiences using this because you're able to sort of sense mood and emotion and facial expressions. It seems like it would be so complex though, because I would imagine people in different countries or different ethnicities have a different range of emotions that they show on their face. How do you account for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that underscores kind of why we need to make sure that our data is global and very diverse. So far we have about 10 million face responses, which is about 5 billion facial frames from about 90 countries around the world. So it's extremely diverse in terms of geography, ethnicity, age, and gender. What we found is that by and large, women tend to be more expressive, but that kind of depends on the culture. So, for instance, in the U.S., women are 40% more expressive and smile more than men do. In in France and Germany, it's 25%. And in the UK, we found no statistically significant difference between men and women, which is really interesting. So it is important to kind of incorporate these cultural differences in how people express in our data and in our benchmarks.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you've used this technology in the advertising industry, in the marketing industry.
Correct. So we partner with 25% of the Fortune Global 500 to test their video content before it goes live. So, if you're Coca-Cola and you're developing a piece of content and you want to know, are people really going to emotionally engage with this video? That you kind of pre-test that before it goes live, and you're able to see the moment-by-moment responses. And content creators make a lot of media spend decisions based on that. So that's really, this product has been in market for over 8 years now. And then kind of the same core technology can be applied to areas like mental health. So we know that if we watch depressive patients, for example, as they engage in content, we're going to see a different set of responses. So there are facial and vocal biomarkers for depression, anxiety, and as we're now spending a lot more time virtually, this technology can be integrated to collect, a person's baseline. And then if you start deviating from that baseline, the algorithm can flag that to the person or to a doctor or a family member. So lots of applications in the mental health and telehealth space as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be really a tremendous alert system for people, maybe for seniors also who, might not be able to articulate a difference in a mood or emotion the same way, or just helping people be more aware of what might be happening with them as you see that baseline change over time. They may not even realize it, and you could be that early warning system that, some type of intervention or something needs to happen, right? Something needs to change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That'll be very interesting for the medical profession then too.
The other application that, we've all, with COVID, we've all been catapulted in this universe where, we're doing a lot of things virtually, like this event, right? If pre-COVID, we would have been in person, and you and I would have been able to riff off of the energy in the audience, right?
Right.
But we can't right now. And so imagine if Emotion AI was integrated into these, live streaming platforms, and we would see a real-time kind of visualization of people's emotion engagement. I find that would be really powerful, because it's really tough for me to do these events when we can't see the audience and we don't know if do they like what we're saying, or are they rolling their eyes, or
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a whole different ballgame when you're trying to interact with an audience, but you have no idea how they're reacting. I actually talk about this a lot when you're pitching too, when you're pitching online, how, you have to sort of assume that your audience is with you, and try to draw them in as much as you can, because you don't have that same sort of reaction in real time that you can see and you can feel when you're in person. So I could see lots of applications there as well, events and speaking and pitching, places where that human feedback is so crucial to the success of what you're doing.
Yeah, and also, wouldn't it be really, I feel like that would be helpful for me as a entrepreneur. Wouldn't it be awesome if, as you did these pitches over and over again, you actually had a way to quantify if you were getting better? Like, are you actually engaging your audience better over time as you do this? And if it could say, oh, this slide is particularly the place where everybody perked up, or this slide, everybody had a brow furrow, you totally lost them. Like, I think that kind of feedback would be really powerful.
That would be really very, very helpful, I think. I think we could all benefit from a little bit of help in interpreting how we're being perceived by people, and trying to get better at that for sure.
Absolutely. It's our next killer app. Let's do it.
Fantastic. I'm waiting for it. What are some of the ethical dilemmas that are presented with offering emotive AI?
Yeah, so the high level kind of hypothesis is quite simple. Like if you look at human intelligence, it's not just your IQ that matters, it's the marriage of your IQ and your EQ. And I believe that that's true for technology as well, especially AI that is so deeply ingrained in our everyday lives and taking on roles that were traditionally done by humans. For example, potentially driving your car or assisting with your healthcare or hiring your next coworker, right? Like all of these decisions that really require a true understanding of humans. Like AI is starting to do a lot of this without any human centric or putting the human back in the center. So we are we're on this journey to build artificial emotional intelligence, which is essentially capturing our nonverbal communication, our facial expressions, our hand gestures, our vocal intonation, and do that in the service of helping these technologies understand the people they're dealing with. And it has a lot of applications, everything from, making our roads safer to mental health, autism. But it also, as I'm sure, a lot of people in the audience are already starting to think that there's a lot of applications that can infringe on people's privacy and
Right.
be manipulative. And so we stay away from those.
So how are you able to, so you've talked about a few things that sound a lot like your personal values being part of this company that you're building and part of the products that you're building. You're talking about ethics. You're talking about the importance of privacy and respecting that. You're talking about EQ, which you personally have very high EQ. And then prior to that, talking about sort of the balance that you have to strike as a CEO in terms of driving the company forward, but you're also sort of trying to build a culture internally with your employees. And then also personally, you're a mom and you have a very busy, full life in lots of different ways. So this is one of your babies, but I know that you have multiple babies. So how do you manage all of those wonderful values that you're bringing to the table and infuse them into the company that you're building and the culture that you would like for this company?
So this is fascinating because you literally outlined our 5 core values. And if you go to our website, you've articulated the 5 core values. And I often say our core values are really who we are. They're not like marketing fluff. They really do represent things that I personally care about, but that I've also kind of instilled in our culture and our company. So human connection, and it's not just in the technology we're building, but it's in how we, treat each other and also how we partner and collaborate with the outside world. Ethics and kind of really recognizing that we have to think through the unintended consequences of the technology and be proactive about it, not wait for legislation or, we have to be thought leaders and advocate for the ethical development and deployment of AI. Third is respecting people's privacy. That's so critical. And that's, again, ingrained in how we go about building the technology and the algorithms and protecting the data. And then balance. And I recognize that it's really hard, but, I lead by example. I have 2 kids and I'm I'm a single mom and I'm very involved in their lives. And you will find chunks of time on my calendar where I'll be like picking Adam up from school or doing Zumba class, right? And I just try to lead by example and give people permission to, prioritize the other things that are important in their lives as well. It's a marathon, not a sprint. That's how we think about it. So all of these things are really true to who we are. I do struggle with balance. My kids will often say, "Mom, it's the weekend. Like, why are you working? Why are you taking that conference call?" But I'm working on it.
Yeah, it is hard. And particularly now, during this time with the pandemic and all the things with our kids home from school or some sort of in school and their activities on hold, like it must be even harder to keep that balance given the context that we're in. And watching it for your employees too, making sure that they're also being, mindful, and that you're, trying to encourage them to make sure that they're having that balance.
Yeah, when the pandemic first hit a few weeks in, I realized I was like in back-to-back Zoom calls, and I literally had no time to make lunch for the kids, or or even check in with them. Yeah. And I thought to myself, if that's happening to me, it must be happening to other people in the company. And so we had all hands on deck and kind of all talked about this. And a suggestion that came out of it is we just gave permission for people to block times on their calendar. Mm-hmm. And we agreed as a team that we would respect these time blocks. So that's been working really well. And I found that, especially in these times, if you lead with empathy and authenticity, but then pair that with like really aggressive, milestones and goals, people will rise to the challenge. Yeah. So that's been my mantra over, the last few months. How about you?
I totally agree with that. I mean, I talk about empathy a lot, actually, especially now. I think we have to be, not only for our teams, in my situation, obviously for students, trying to understand the situation that they're in. And I just think that there is no downside to injecting empathy into everything that we're doing right now. Everybody needs it, and everybody can appreciate how other people need it. I do think it's an important quality in all of our leaders right now. Any other tips for people who are trying to lead in the COVID-19 times?
I think it's also recognizing that everybody is going through a very unique set of challenges, and not make assumptions. I often tell people, you're seeing my background and it looks pretty organized, but if I rotate the camera to the left or to the right, you see all the chaos, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I think it's just recognizing that people have their own unique challenges, and it's it's important to try and kind of be helpful with that.
Yeah, exactly. Looking for ways that you can support them that maybe they aren't even thinking of, but you kind of see as an outsider, and you can offer that helping hand. Yeah. Another thing you talk about a lot in your book, that I think is really important, is the idea of mentorship. And, Dr. Picard has been an incredible mentor to you, and then you went into business together. Talk a little bit about the role of mentorship in your career, and then how you try to be a mentor to others today.
Yeah, I mean, there are many examples where I've had incredible mentors who, believed in me, took a risk on me. Roz took a risk, right? I was this, freshly graduated PhD student from Cairo. I had to commute between Cairo and Cambridge for a number of years. And she took a risk and brought me on as a postdoc and believed in me, right? And I could look at her and say, wow, like I want to be like her, right? She was not just a mentor, she was somebody I could relate to. And I think that's really important in a mentor, that, you see yourself in them in one way or another. And I could, she's a mom, she's a very successful scientist, she's very entrepreneurial, and I loved all these qualities about her. But also throughout this whole CEO story that I shared, I had a couple of mentors, both guys, who kind of nudged me behind the scenes, right? Like one of them in particular said, you know what, you should be CEO. Let's visualize it together. And he would like coach me through it. He would say things like, imagine you're walking into the office in 6 months and you're the CEO. What would that look like? What would you do, right? And so slowly I internalized it. I overcame kind of my own doubts about it. So yeah, I think mentors are really critical. And I try to pay it forward. I'm involved in a number of organizations. For example, All Raise. I know you're involved with All Raise as well. It's very focused on female founders and female funders. And I'm on the Boston steering committee and really believe in that mission. And through that network, I mentor, a number of female founders. We also have a very robust training and mentorship program at Affectiva. We just this last summer, we did it virtually. So we had about 50 young people, high school students, undergrads, postgrads, join the program for around the world. And
Wow.
yeah, and for us, this is about training the next generation of AI leaders. So that was really awesome.
That's amazing. I love that. You mentioned, some of the organizations that you're involved with, and you're an underrepresented founder in like 15 different categories.
Right.
The fact that you were able to get your Ph.D. From Cambridge and do your postdoc at MIT, and you're Egyptian and you're an immigrant and you're all these things that, a lot of people have one, you have
All of
many.
them.
Like many, many. Talk about, if you can, like any thoughts about how to make the tech startup community more inclusive and diverse. Obviously, it is critical for the future of tech and innovation just in general that we have diverse perspectives represented. But how do you make an inclusive work environment? How can we make an inclusive ecosystem? What are your thoughts there?
Oh gosh. So first of all, I agree with you. We need diversity and inclusivity, not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's the only way we're going to get technology that works for all of us. So I'm a big believer of that. And the more perspectives you have around the table, the better the outcome and the innovation is going to end up being. So that's important. The way we get there, I liked how you said like an inclusive and a diverse ecosystem. We need more diverse founders, but we certainly need more diverse investors too. We've raised at Affectiva over $53 million in strategic and venture funding. And the very first check we raised was over 10 years ago. I met with zero, as in like zero female investors. It was all, very like what you'd expect, right? Like
Right.
older white guys.
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised to hear that.
Yeah, and I feel we've made a little bit of progress. So in our last round of funding, I was adamant this time round to bring in more diverse investors. So we brought in two funds, both have female partners and both have people of color as partners. So for me, that was really important. But it was hard, right? It required a lot of purpose and kind of focused efforts to find these investors. So we need help across the ecosystem. And then I think we need to make sure that we as leaders, so if you're in a position of leadership within your company, make sure that, if you're in a position where you're hiring people, make sure that the pipeline you're seeing is a diverse one. And if you're working with recruiters or recruiting companies, be clear that if the pipeline's not diverse, you're not going to take a look at it. With your team, we do that all the time at Affectiva. If a woman gets cut off, like if somebody on my team anybody, but usually, unfortunately, it's the women on the team. If they get cut off, I'll say, "Oh, hang on a second, Debi, what were you saying? I want to listen to what Debi's saying," right? Or
Right.
I'll make sure to give credit. So now that's become common practice within the company, and I think we need to support each other in this way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you have to be so intentional, and you have to be so intentional every day. It's like you can't stop for even 1 second about questioning, the way that you're running things and the way that you're doing things. Am I being inclusive? Am I creating an environment that everyone feels comfortable and ready to give their best? It is quite a lot, but it's only after being intentional for such a long time that it becomes ingrained in the culture, right?
Totally. And what we've also found is, one of the big issues in the technology we're building is around data and algorithmic bias. And so I found that unless we prioritize that as a company, it just won't get done, right? We won't be thinking about all of these biases intentionally, as you said. And so I tie a portion of our bonus as an executive team to implementing approaches that mitigate these biases. I also make sure that when we are engaging with partners, and I'll share a story. we do a lot of work in the automotive industry. And last year we engaged with a top automaker, European luxury brand. And they said, oh, we're going to send you a data set. Can you evaluate it on your algorithms? And so we did. And I took a look at the data set. These are drivers, right? These are supposed to represent like drivers around the world. And it was literally, they have an R&D office in Poland. So it was these like young, blue-eyed, blonde Polish guys driving these vehicles. And I was like, hang on a second. This is not at all representative of this kind of global automaker. This is not representative of their customers. So instead of just getting paid and moving on, we went back to them and we said, you know what? Let's collaborate on a truly representative data set here. And you know, we were risking the relationship. They could have said no. We were risking getting paid, but I felt like it was the right thing to do as a company.
Right.
So it is important to prioritize it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that couldn't have been easy either. I mean, they probably didn't really like having that pointed out to them.
Right. But again, I think a lot of it is unintentional, right? People are just, you know, they don't know any better. And I feel like as leaders in this space, there's a portion of education and evangelism.
Right. And just calling it out and, you know, just saying we can do better, right? We can be better.
Exactly.
So I think your book and your story is incredible. It really, I think it's touching, it's emotional, but it's also scientifically incredibly interesting. It's the future. I also want to point out that your TED Talk is fantastic too. Although that was several years ago, it's still, you know, really relevant and interesting. So I would recommend people to check that out too. Any last thoughts about your book and what you hope the impact is of it, or what you hope people take away from reading it? I think generally when you read the comments about your book, so many people sort of said, oh my gosh, like this moved me so much, you know, this inspired me so much. So is that what you were going for? Is it, you know, what would you like to say on that?
You know, this is my first book. I know you've written a couple. For me, what I didn't realize is that the book is really like a conversation starter. And I found that that's been so true. So as people read the book, they reach out and they say, hey, you know, read the book, loved it. I'm like, hang on a second, what part resonated the most with you? And we start this friendship and this conversation. And that's happened so many times with people from all over the world. And that was really unexpected. And I just cherish that so much.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very, very cool. Well, thank you for your time today, Rana. It was great to spend some time hearing more about your background and your journey. And if people want to hear more about it and really dive into emotional AI, which is certainly an innovation that is crucial to our future and all the things that we hope to build with technology going forward. So it's a great read. You'll learn a lot, and you definitely will leave inspired. Thanks, Rana, for writing a great book and for spending some time with me today.
Thank you for having me. And if you read the book, please reach out and share your thoughts. Thank you.
Fantastic.